Okay, so this video is not going to be a mapping video, as in countries are not going to be talking to each other on a map. No. This video is going to be, how do you say it, an alternate history up style video? Well, my take on it anyway. And just to clear something up, corrupted and alternate future of Europe are on hold currently. They are going to be continued, but they're going to be completely remade. But not right now, because, well, burnout, obviously. So, I'm making this video, and possibly 2 others of this kind, to make up for, well, my mapping videos. So with that out of the way, let's get into the situation. The year's 1917, and the Provisional Government is falling apart. The Bolsheviks in Russia have seized the Russian city capital. The Russian capital, that's what I meant. And, well, a civil war just started in Russia. And after, 4 years of conflict, the Bolsheviks came out on top, with the White Army and the Provisional Government being crushed. But what if this didn't happen? Alright, I know, this is a pretty dumb topic to cover. Especially now, there could be more, how do you put it, quote-unquote, media attention topics I could cover. But I'm bored, okay? Give me a break. So first off, what was the Provisional Government? One thing that's often overlooked is the Provisional Government itself. People mostly think that is the Russian Empire that's overthrown by the Bolsheviks. I probably just butchered that name. People often think that it's the Bolsheviks that overthrew the Russian Empire. This isn't true. They overthrew the Provisional Government. The Provisional Government overthrew the Russian monarchy because, well, the Russian monarchy sucked at the time. Thanks, Tsar Nicholas II. You suck. But anyway, with that, the Russian Civil War was set in motion. And although the Provisional Government held out for a while, they weren't, equipped to deal with this. They weren't equipped to deal with the World War, and let alone a civil war along with that. So, what I want to explore today is how could the Provisional Government have stopped all of this from happening? And I am considering this. I'm considering making a part 2, but with the White Army. What if they won? But today, we will just be looking at the Provisional Government and what if they won. Alright, with that being said, let's do this thing. So what would the Provisional Government have to do to to pull out of the World War I? And the reason I say this is because they would have had to pull out of the war. That was one thing that they said that ultimately led to their downfall. The Russian Provisional Government said they would pull out, but they didn't. So they got overthrown by the communists, leading to the creation of the USSR. But how? But what would they lose in order to leave the war? So let's look at a map of 1917. They had already lost all of the Kingdom of Poland, which was a province of Russia, if you didn't know. Well, more like a Austria-Hungary situation there. I don't know. They had lost all of that. So they would have lost that to the Germans anyway. Let's look at another region called Ukraine. what would happen to Ukraine? The Germans would want it to become a puppet state. The Russians, on the other hand, would either want to hold on to it or for it to become an independent puppet state to both nations. Eventually, the nations would agree. Eventually, Germany and the Provisional Government would agree to have Ukraine as an independent nation that would have ties with both of them. Now time to cover the Baltic states. The Baltic states would be Russian puppets. No, wait. They would be German puppets, not Russian puppets. What am I thinking? Now, what about the weird region called Belarus, or Belarus, whatever you want to call it? Belarus was, well, at the end of 1918, was under the majority of modern-day Belarus was under control of the Germans. And another portion was under the control of the Russian Civil War area thing. I don't know what to call it. The lands that were under the Russian Civil War. I guess that would be a better term for it. So they would most likely be given independence as well. And at the very most, they would be a puppet of Germany. Now let's look south to the Caucasus, where there was another nation just south of the Caucasus called the Ottoman Empire. So the Ottoman Empire would probably, most definitely would take ethnic Armenian territory and proceed to, well, something. If I say it, it's going to probably. No, wait, I can't get demonetized yet. Yes. They would most likely genocide every Armenian there. Or most. Azerbaijan and Georgia, not the state, the country or region, would be Ottoman puppets or fully integrated into the Ottoman Empire. Most likely would be puppets. And another region will go to the Ottomans as an occupied portion. Now what about the Turkmenistan region? No, I don't mean the country, I mean the whole region. Russia would probably give it independence due to the fact that they were hard to control, and Russia needed to focus on Russia, not empire lands. So that's what they would lose initially out of the war. And you're probably thinking, well, what about Finland? Well, Finland was given a special status within the Russian Empire when it was annexed. Sort of like a colony of sorts. But, well, integrated into the empire fully. Kind of like Ireland was to the United Kingdom. And Scotland is, well, in modern day. So let's answer the question: would Finland be given independence? Probably. At the very least, they would be kept as a puppet state of the Russian state. Well, provisional government, that's what I meant. So, let's just say Ukraine, Belarus, Turkmenistan, and Finland all have independence now. And Poland and the Baltic states are under control of Germany. Now, this begs the question: what would happen to the end of World War I? Who would win the war? Well, I would like to think that there would be a stalemate of sorts. When the Russian Civil War broke out and Germany made a deal with the Bolsheviks, they made a deal to rush in, get my pun there, they rushed into the territories of Ukraine, Belarus, the Baltic, and other occupied regions. But this left their Western Front vulnerable to invasion by the Americans that were rushing in. So, what would be next? Well, World War I would probably end in a stalemate, obviously. Well, it's not that obvious. Austria-Hungary would most likely definitely still break up, as in our timeline, and possibly seceding ethnic lands to Poland and Ukraine, as well as Romania, and the new state of Yugoslavia, as well as giving independence to Czechia, Slovakia, and would split up into Austria and Hungary. And, giving lands to Italy as well. I forgot about them. But what does this mean for the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria? Well, these are the two lesser important members of the World War. Alright, before the angry Bulgarians go in the comments saying that Bulgaria is always important, I'm not saying Bulgaria didn't hold its own ground and show that it was a strong power. They did, but they weren't as a major power as Germany, Austria-Hungary, and, well, to a lesser extent, the Ottomans. And this begs the question as well, would the Ottomans still break up? Again, like Austria-Hungary, probably, but not as much as they did in our timeline. In our timeline, the Entente forced the Ottoman Empire to break up. They would probably still lose lands, but they would not lose lands as much as they did in our timeline. And they would probably still get to keep their puppet states in the south. Now, let's take a look at Russia again. What would happen to Russia? This is the main topic of the video, as you know. But the Provisional Government, let's talk about them for a moment. They are simply just that, a provisional government. They were set in place to govern the people while other people, figured out what to do with the country. Now, let's take a look at the communists. The communists were a minority within Russia at the time. Most of them exiled to Switzerland or other countries. And they were hoping to come back during the end of the Second World War. No, wait, not the second, the first. They were hoping to come back and bring a swift end to the conflict by having a coup in Russia, which is ultimately what they did in real life. But now they didn't have the chance because Russia was going to begin reforming into a republic, adopting several similar ideas as the United States, France, and to a lesser extent, the United Kingdom. So let's take a look back at what our world looks like, what this alternate world looks like right now. So the United States didn't enter the war because it ended in a stalemate. The Germans would probably still lose their colonies, but not as many. They would still lose lands, but not all their colonies, due to the fact that the war ended in a stalemate. They would probably gain lands from Belgium and annex all of Luxembourg. But the borders with France would most likely remain the same. And like I said, with Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire, borders would be messed around with for the first couple of years after their collapse. Let your mind run wild on that. So this would turn into a Cold War situation, again, between Germany and its allies, between France, Britain, and their allies. So now we have another question. Would fascism in World War II be the same? No. Fascism would probably still rise, but probably not in Germany. Perhaps Italy, and Italy would perhaps ally with Germany, turning its guns on its former allies. And this brings on another question. How would this play into World War II? Well, now we're going into territory that is, uncharted. It's easy to predict what would happen in the first days, weeks, and months after altering the timeline. But predicting what would happen in the following years is hard to do, as there are so many factors we have to add in. Here I'm going to just give you my rough estimate as what I would imagine would happen. Like I said, Germany, Italy, and their allies would go to war with France, Britain, and their allies, resulting in a Second World War. Now, who would win this war is up to you. You could say that Germany wins and gets all the lands they want, or you could say the Entente wins and beats down Germany and Italy like in our Second World War. Obviously not as much. But how would Russia play into this? Well, Russia would be a recovering nation from the First World War. They would not want to participate in any outside conflicts unless it was necessary. Take, for instance, the final warlord era of China. They would possibly intervene only in Manchuria to keep the Japanese from getting any influence. This would most likely take place in 1937, possibly sparking a war between with Russia and China being on one side and Japan being on the other, competing for control of Manchuria. This is what I can guess. This is mostly what I can guess can happen. Alternate history is such an interesting topic, and it needs to thrive. Even just altering one person's death can mean everything. Or altering one person's actions can change the world. Now, I can't see much beyond this, such as going into the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and even the early 2000s. I can't predict what would happen then. The most I can predict is how the Second World War would come out. Possibly, if I had done a little bit more research for this video, I could have predicted more accurately what would have happened. But like I said, I just wanted to make this video for fun, and, sort of as a side video, rather than doing a mapping video because those take forever. Anyway, this has been your host, Irish American Mapping, and I'll see you all next time.